All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're having a nice Tuesday. Thanks for joining today's webinar on C406 for lighting and equipment. I just launched a quick poll. So you can take a minute to fill that out. It helps us understand how you found out about this series. My name is Erica DeLello. I'm a senior project manager at Noresco, and I've been working to provide these types of trainings for the last several years, and we've got a whole bunch more on the docket here, as you can see on the screen. We've got one tomorrow on residential air sealing and fire blocking, and then we have our last episode within this series on Thursday, based on renewable and load management credits within C406. So that was originally going to happen on the 11th, but it was Veterans Day, so we shifted it a week early. So make sure it's on the right slot on your calendar. All right, let's see here. If you're a jurisdiction looking for code adoption assistance, we're here to help. So if you need any of the services that are listed on the screen or not on the screen, feel free to reach out to me, and we can help get your jurisdiction across the finish line or help with implementation or adoption or whatever that looks like. We've got a whole bunch of different resources available on the Code Adoption Toolkit, so definitely check that out. We're working on several other resources right now. Anna just sent me over a bunch for the low energy and carbon code too, so things are underway. And if there's a resource here that you don't see, but you're like, hey, that would be really helpful to have, I'm going to post in the chat an energy resource survey that we're launching for probably another 2 weeks, just trying to facilitate feedback, see what you guys need to implement the LECC and how we can support you all. So I'll put that link in the chat shortly. Last but not least is the Colorado Codes Helpline. Submit a question on any of the I-codes and get a response within a couple days. So definitely use that. Okay, just a couple housekeeping items before I give it over to Anna to kick off this session. Is if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or write it in the Q&A. And Anna's been kind of answering it throughout each of the webinars so that we can answer those questions while it's fresh in our heads. So definitely do that. And then upon closing out of this webinar, there will be a survey that pops up. If you could please take a minute to respond to it. It helps us to identify future webinar topics and improve on these sessions. All right, that's all I got. You're up, Anna.
Hi, everyone. I hope you are excited. This presentation today is definitely more concise than last week's was. HVAC and service water heating in 1 hour was a tight squeeze. So we have a little bit more time. If you guys have attended the previous sessions within this series, and you would like to ask any questions about those credits at the end, I'm happy to go back. And quick reminder, I know Erica just said we'll be going through those renewable and load management credits on Thursday. But if you have any questions about those that you would like to talk about today, I'm happy to talk through them. So today we're going to be talking about the next section of the credits in section C406, which are equipment and lighting, lighting and power. Oh, my name is Anna McCullough. For those of you who I don't know, I'm energy team leader at Group 14 Engineering. I have been giving these trainings for a few years as well. I was supported CEO and the Energy Code Board in developing the Model Low Energy and Carbon Code as their technical advisor for the commercial side. So I've had quite a bit of experience with it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You'll see my contact information at the end of this, and Erica will be sending out the slides at the end as well, so you can have them as a resource. All right, let's jump into it. So credit P01, energy monitoring. Any project any building that's not required to comply with section C405.13 can achieve credits within credit P01 for installing an energy monitoring system that complies with the requirements of section C405.13.1 through C405.13.5. So if for those of you who are familiar with the 2024 IECC and the Model Low Energy and Carbon Code, you know that there are now energy monitoring requirements for non-electrical end uses. So if you have gas water heating or gas heating, you need to be monitoring those end uses as well. But under this credit, we are just requiring electrical energy monitoring. So what kind of credits what kind of buildings can achieve credits in this section? I put a note in here. So we're talking about the Model Low Energy and Carbon Code. So under the Model Low Energy and Carbon Code, energy monitoring is required for any building 25,000 square feet or greater. If you are looking at the 2024 IECC, that area is 10,000 square feet. So it was amended in the Model Low Energy and Carbon Code to be a larger area, larger building before requiring that energy monitoring. Dwelling units in R2 occupancies are accepted from this. So if we're talking about a large multifamily building, 100,000 square feet, and it only has, well, that would be too big. Maybe let's say like 50,000 square feet, and it only has 20,000 square feet of common area. The energy monitoring would not be required for that building. But if it has 25,000 square feet or greater common area space, then it would be required to have energy monitoring. The end uses that are required to be monitored are the total HVAC system. So heating, cooling, and ventilation, including fans, pumps, electric boilers, chillers, and water heating. You can exclude 120 volt equipment where your main coming into the building is 480 volt power. So you can those little like one-off unit heaters or little transfer fans that you have don't need to be included in your total HVAC system monitoring. Interior lighting needs to be monitored separately. Exterior lighting, plug loads, any process loads, so anything that is not included in an HVAC lighting or plug load category, but exceeds 5% of the peak connected load of the building has to be monitored separately. It could be you have like a data center in your building, or you have an all-electric kitchen. Those process loads need to be monitored. Building operations and other miscellaneous loads. So everything else that's not included in this table could be elevators, escalators, swimming pools, snow melt systems, ornamental fountains it has listed. Items like that all need to be monitored. And then electric hot water heating for uses other than space conditioning. So if you have an aquatherm system and you're using an electric water heater, that's going to be included in your total HVAC system load. But if you have electric water heating that is just generating domestic heat, hot water, you would have to monitor that unless it is less than 10% of the building service rating. And we got a question. Would a building divided up with firewalls be looked at as a whole, or each section divided by the walls? If the building is being occupied by one tenant, then it's looked at as a whole. if you are having individual tenants that are not permitting together, those would be individual tenants. If you're, and there is an exception in the code for tenants that I didn't include. Oop, we can all just look right at it together. Make sure I have the right IECC up. Been bouncing around today. We are looking for C405. Here it is. If you have a end use metering shall not be required for an individual tenant space having a floor area not greater than 2,500 square feet where you have a dedicated source meter. That's in the 2024 IECC, and then the model low energy and carbon code. Sorry, I have it in black. I was looking at this at nighttime and it was hurting my eyes. Sorry for the scrolling. If you are a tenant space, that is 5,000 square feet, you are not required to have individual energy use monitoring. I hope that answered your question, John, but feel free to reach out if I didn't. So let's pop back here to this one. And hopefully you guys could see Bluebeam. I think I shared my whole screen instead of just PowerPoint, but
Yep, we could see it.
okay, great.
And it does
Thanks,
look
Eric.
like we have a question in the chat.
Yeah, that's the one I was just answering for John.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Erica. Okay, so that's our energy monitoring credit, and now we're moving into lighting systems. The process load equipment credits are after lighting systems in section C406. So again, we cannot combine all credits in section C406. I did do a little asterisk. Right now, credit L01 is reserved for future use. So it's not included in the list here. It drives me a little bit crazy that we're starting on L02, so bear with me. So you can have the following pathways. You can get credits L02 through L06 individually, or you can create combinations. So L02 high-end trim lighting controls can only be combined with L03, increase the occupancy sensors, and L04, increased daylight area. If you don't go after the high-end trim lighting controls, you can combine L03 with L04, L05, which is residential light control, and L06, which is reduced lighting power. So if you're providing the fancy controls for reducing the total power permitted by the lighting fixtures, L02, we'll talk through it. You cannot also achieve credits for reducing your lighting power. We'll go through them and go through some examples where there are calculations and talk about what each of these does. So L02, high-end trim lighting controls. This was a new one for me. And it's interesting. It's something that we talk about a lot in practice, like limiting the total power output for all of the lighting fixtures in a room. But now it is listed and it has a name, high-end trim lighting controls, and I'm excited to start using that name. So I was excited. Oh, let's go back. Before we get into this, we got another question. Getting back to John's questions, what about R2 occupancies that are separated by a firewall due to size limitations? So R2 occupancies for the energy use monitoring are accepted. So no R2 occupancies need to have energy use monitoring based on section C406. Or I'm sorry, section C405.13. I hope that answered your question. If not, feel free to type a little bit additional in the chat and we'll get to it as we keep moving. So high-end trim lighting controls, for those of you who aren't aware what this is, it's a lighting control setting that limits the maximum power to individual luminaries or groups of luminaires in a space. So what that means is that, for example, I have this picture of this controls, and it has a zone name. So we have a zone controller. The maximum trim level is 90%. So no matter how high they put the dimmer in the space, those light fixtures are only going to put out a total of 90% of their maximum wattage. So to achieve credits under credit section L02, at least 50% of the project interior floor area, exclusive of dwelling and sleeping units, have to be qualifying spaces. Qualifying spaces are spaces where general lighting is controlled by high-end trim lighting controls. Just using the terminology in the credits so that when you guys go back and read it, you can track. So the lighting controls that are provided in these qualifying spaces must comply with the following. The calibration equipment, so this controls bit that we just looked at, can only be accessed by authorized personnel. That means your maintenance team, your building owner, staff, something like that. If we're talking about a school, right? Every teacher doesn't have access to these controls. The students don't have access to these controls. It's just the, I don't know, maintenance staff, maybe admin, I don't know, but not everyone. The users, so the people in the room, cannot increase the lighting power above the maximum level established by the high-end trim controls. We just talked about that example of 90%. And the construction documents must state that the maximum light output in these spaces must not be greater than 85% of full power or light output. So again, rather than that 90% maximum, it would be 85% to achieve credits under credit section L02. They also have to be commissioned per section C408. So if we're thinking about this in the larger picture and only a portion of your building you decide can be can qualify for this, right? You have a gymnasium that needs to be at 100% lighting power, something like that. You can prorate based on the total percentage of qualifying spaces in the building based on their floor area. So what that means is you take the qualified spaces percentage of your total floor area. So say you have 75% of your total building qualifies, multiply it by the base credits in the table and divide it by 50%. L03, increase occupancy sensors. Basically requires occupancy sensors in spaces where they are not already required. And we're going to run through these because there are some interesting ones. Food preparation areas, so a commercial kitchen, laboratories, elevator lobbies, pharmacy areas, vehicular maintenance area. That one surprised me. A lot of these, and this is my opinion, but a lot of these I think would be difficult to implement. For example, like a vehicular maintenance area, you're underneath a car, although I guess you have a light under the car. So if the occupancy sensor doesn't see you, it's not necessarily a problem, but it might be dangerous. If you have a workshop, a recreation room in a facility for the visually impaired, exercise area in a fitness center, playing area in a fitness center, an exam or treatment room in a healthcare facility, an imaging room in a healthcare facility, a lot of spaces in healthcare facilities, a physical therapy room in a healthcare facility, library reading area, library stacks, although asterisk, we're going to talk about those controls here in a minute, a detailed manufacturing area, an equipment room in a manufacturing facility, low bay area in a manufacturing facility, a post office sorting area, religious fellowship hall, hair salon, nail salon, banking activity area, or a museum restoration room. If you have any of those space types in your building, you can qualify for credits under section L03. So they do have additional information about because within section C405, there are a lot of different occupancy sensor requirements for different space types. So there are different, within credit L03, there are also explanations around how the occupancy sensors should be implemented in some of these specialty spaces. So in library stacks and laboratories, you have to comply with the occupancy sensor requirements of section C405.2.1.2. That section requires that lighting in each aisleway shall be controlled independently. So, when you're walking through a warehouse with a bunch of aisles and the lights come on as you go down each aisle. That's what they want to see here in laboratories and library stacks. The unoccupied set point for those, each aisleway is going to be 50% of full power, so you're not going completely dark. And that is within 20 minutes of all occupants leaving the space or the aisleway. In elevator lobbies, you have to comply with C405.2.1.4. And so that is just the unoccupied set point of 50% of full power within 20 minutes of all occupants leaving the space. And then all of those other space types that we talked about on the last slide have to comply with the general section for occupancy controls, which is C405.2.1.1. All lights are off within 20 minutes of unoccupancy. The manual on or controlled to automatically turn on lighting to not more than 50% power. And then you have to incorporate the manual control to allow occupants to turn off lights. So that's the increase for occupancy sensor. And you must, all of your building area, every space type that let me say that one more time. If you have elevator lobbies on every floor of your building, all of them have to comply with these credits to achieve credits. There is no prorating for the increased occupancy sensor credit. Increased daylight area. This one's interesting, and a little bit more fun. As much fun as lighting controls can be. The total daylight area of the building shall be at least 5% greater than the typical daylight area from table C406.2.5.4. We'll talk about the table in a minute. Credits are determined from either equation 4-23 or 4-24, whichever is less. We'll talk about that. It's pretty easy to figure out which credit is going to be less or which equation is going to result in less credits. So we'll talk through those too. You don't have to do both. The total daylight area of the building is going to equal the total building floor area within daylight zones divided by the total building floor area used to determine the lighting power allowance. So you're not necessarily looking at the gross floor area. I was trying to think about like an area of the building that wouldn't have lights. And the only thing I could think of was like a mechanical shaft. Or you probably have lights in elevator shafts. But so just you want to be looking at if in your comm check, the total building floor area that you are inputting into CommCheck is the divisor in this equation. And the numerator is going to be the total building floor area that you're calculating and showing in your daylighting zones on your construction documents. So that table that we just talked about, table C406.2.5.4, I have recreated here. And what this does is you have a building use type and then a typical daylight area and a maximum daylight area that can be basically that they'll give you credit for. So if you are a small office, group B, your typical daylight area is 10%. The maximum daylight area that they'll let you take credit for is 20%. Even if 50% of your building is in a daylight area, you just have like solar tubes everywhere. You can only take credit for 20%. So we'll talk through that. You'll see that these are the only groups that can earn credits under credit section L04. So we have group B, group M, group E, groups S1 and S2 warehouse, and then other than warehouse, you can't get credits. So equation 4-23, and I just put in these pictures of what a daylight zone is for illustrative purposes. Don't worry about them. Equation 4-23, the credits achieved are going to be the credits from the base credits from the table times 20 times the total daylight area of the building as a fraction minus the typical percentage of the building area without daylight control as a fraction. Or I'm sorry, with daylight control as a fraction. So we're going to use a school as an example in climate zone 6B. We're going to say that it's 56% daylit. So there's a lot of solar tubes and skylights. The credits under this equation, 4-23, would be 5 times 20 times 0.56 minus 0.42, right? We go back to this group E, the typical daylight area, and that gives us 14 credits. But if we look at equation 4-24, we have the same equation, except it's the maximum daylight area of the building as a fraction minus the typical percentage of building area with daylight control. So here, all we're doing is substituting this maximum percentage, which is 52%, for the total daylight area of our design, which is 56%. So that gives us only 10 credits. We have to go with the 10 credits. So when we're looking at this, if you're looking at this credit, seeing what equation you should use, if your building's daylight area exceeds the maximum daylight area, that's the value that you need to use for calculating the number of credits you can receive. L05 residential light control is only applicable for R2 occupancy space types. Interior lighting systems shall comply with the following. Common area space types shall have occupant sensor controls that comply with section C405.2.1.1. So if we go back, sorry, this is going to require that all lights turn off within 20 minutes of all occupants leaving the space, and then we have the manual on or controlled to automatically come on to 50%. So we are going to require those in laundry and washing areas, any common dining areas. So this is outside of the residential unit common areas, food preparation areas, seating areas, exercise areas, and surprisingly massage spaces. Didn't know how many R2 buildings have massage spaces, but if you do, you need to have occupancy controls now to get credits under L05. So, but then in the dwelling units themselves, not less than one receptacle in each living room and each sleeping room shall be controlled by a switch in that room. And then this is the one that I think is going to be much more difficult to get people to comply with, which is that lights and switched receptacles in bathrooms and kitchens shall be controlled by an occupant sensor. Again, complying with section C405.2.1.1. So that's where all occupants leave the space, lights turn off within 20 minutes. And then all other lights and switched receptacles in each dwelling unit shall be controlled by a switch at the main entrance to the unit. So that's that same idea that we talked about last week with the hotel rooms, right? You have the master switch you turn on. So when people are leaving their unit, they can turn off the master switch. And then all of their lights and switched receptacles would turn off. So I think this is kind of the first two are fairly easy to comply with. That third item within credit L05 is difficult. And then L06, reduced lighting power. So this table on the left here are the maximum number of credits you can achieve for reduced lighting power under credit L06 for every occupancy group and climate zone in Colorado. So we have the base requirement is that the connected interior lighting power shall show 5% savings from the maximum allowed lighting power. So we're showing 5% savings in our com check, essentially. If you have higher savings, if you have 15% savings, or I forget, I think it's 20%. We'll get to it in the calculation on the next chart, on the next slide. But if you have more savings than that 5%, you get more credits. The maximum number of credits that you can receive for credit L06 is 4 times the base credits listed in the table. And so this is the maximum number of credits shown here. So you'll see in offices, they're going to be weighting this very heavily. In schools, they're going to be weighting this very heavily. Groups R2, R4, and I1, we're just looking at the common area spaces here, right? I2, they're also going to be weighting this fairly heavily. So, oh, I'm sorry. And then to achieve credits here for residential occupancies, all permanently installed lighting serving dwelling units and sleeping units shall be provided with lamps with an efficacy of not less than 90 lumens per watt by luminaires that have an efficacy of not less than 65 lumens per watt. So there are requirements for the fixtures within the residential units themselves as well. And this is, again, the maximum number of credits you can receive in each climate zone for your occupancy type. So there is an equation to calculate the total energy credits that you can receive. Your credits are going to equal the base credits from the table times 20 times the interior lighting power allowed, the maximum interior lighting power allowed from your com check, minus the connected interior lighting power provided from your com check, divided by the interior lighting power allowed. So it's just like our percentage savings, right? So I did, for example, an office in climate zone 5B. It's 35,000 square feet. For simplicity, I'm just assuming we're going with the building area method. So there's 0.62 watts per square foot allowed. I said that we have a designed lighting power density of 0.465 watts per square foot. So we're going to take the base credits, which is 7, multiply it by 20, and then multiply that by our percentage savings, which is 20%, and we get 35 credits. Wait. We're in climate zone 5B, we're group B. The maximum number of credits we can achieve is 28. So even though we are showing higher savings, we're only going to achieve those 28 credits. That's it for lighting. Any questions before we start talking about power and other process loads? Great. Q01 efficient elevators. The requirement is that elevators must be Class A per ISO standard 25745-2, Table 7. It took me a very long time to figure out what is this. And essentially, the recommendation that I have is to ask your elevator manufacturer and to specify an elevator that is Class A per ISO standard 25745-2 Table 7. There is a calculation that you can do that I have over here on the right. That has quite a few variables, but essentially is looking at the estimated energy consumption per day based on the power and the runtime and the height of your building, number of floors, things like that. You can only achieve credits for this credit section if your building is 3 stories or taller. And then if your compliance ratio, which we'll talk about here in 1 second, is below 0.5, you cannot achieve credits. So the compliance ratio is the number of floors served by Class A elevators divided by the number of floors served by all building elevators and escalators. So I'm picturing if you have a hospital and you have greater than 50% of your elevators and escalators are not Class A, they are freight elevators, for example, then you are not going to achieve compliance with this credit. You can prorate your credits. So you take the credits from the base credits from the table based on your building occupancy group and climate zone and multiply it by that compliance ratio we just talked about. I found quite a few manufacturers online. You could look up what elevators they have that are Class A per ISO, but I'm not going to say it again. It seems like this has been a requirement in some states in California for a couple of years, so it seems relatively well accepted among elevator manufacturers. So that's good news. But I am not sure that freight elevators, for example, could comply with this. The research I did was telling me that no, they probably could not. Q02, efficient commercial kitchen equipment. I did not pull all the tables into this, but we'll talk through it. There's quite a few tables, a couple pages of tables for this credit. Sorry. So for buildings and spaces that are designated as Group A2 or facilities whose primary business type involves the use of a commercial kitchen, so restaurant, you can achieve credits under this credit section Q02. So here are the requirements 1 through 3. At least 1 gas or electric fryer must be installed before issuance of the certificate of occupancy. If you do not have a fryer, you cannot comply with this section. Number 2, all fryers, dishwashers, steam cookers, and ovens installed before COO must meet the performance factors in tables C406.2.6.21 through C406.2.6.24. Those tables, and I have this kind of below right there, include requirements for idle energy rate, cooking efficiency, washing efficiency, and water consumption. So how effective are your appliances? How much energy are they using when you're not actually using them to cook and they're just on staying warm? For dishwashers, how much water is being used? How much water washing energy is being used? And all of those are laid out in the tables. They also, manufacturers have to show that they are being tested per the ISO standards listed in the tables. And again, in the research that I did, it seemed relatively accepted by commercial kitchen equipment manufacturers, these ISO standards that are being required in the 2024 IECC and Model Low Energy and Carbon Code. Another important thing, and this is something that we typically don't see in construction documents, all of those associated performance levels have to be shown in the construction documents. So we're going to pull up the code again. And go to these tables. So for example, if you are a commercial steam cooker and your electric steam 5-pan, they want to see the cooking energy efficiency of 50% or greater called out on the drawings, and the idle energy rate of 670 watts called out. So they want to make sure, and this is really for the reviewers, right? So they can go through the construction documents and you can say, check, check on ComCheck. Yes, we comply with this. But the reviewers need to be able to go back into the kitchen drawings and see these actual factors being called out on within the schedules. So you'll see here, this is the commercial dishwasher requirements. They have idle energy rates, washing energy, and water consumption for high temperature versus low temperature. And then we also have the commercial ovens called out here with the idle rate and cooking energy efficiency. It's really interesting. So I was recently, as an aside, I was working on a commercial restaurant recently, and we were calculating their idle energy for the different kitchen appliances for our energy model that we were creating. And so I had all of these tables pulled up that are listed in ASHRAE from like the fundamentals 2021. I still have it sitting next to my desk, but and I was comparing what was called out in ASHRAE versus what's called out here in the 2024 IECC, and these do require additional efficiency over what ASHRAE has listed as kind of the general standard efficiency for the different commercial kitchen appliances. So I thought that was interesting. And Q03, efficient residential kitchen equipment. So for projects with group R1 and R2 occupancies, so hotels and permanent residents, credits can be achieved where all dishwashers, refrigerators, and freezers must be installed before the issuance of COO and comply with the Energy Star Most Efficient 2021 label with the following specifications: refrigerators and freezers 5.0, 0915, 2014, and dishwashers 6.0. If you are installing an appliance before COO, you want to get credit under Q03. All of your refrigerators, dishwashers, and freezers must comply with this Energy Star Most Efficient 2021 label. Washers and dryers are not included. Microwaves aren't included. Water heaters aren't included. It's really just dishwashers, refrigerators, and freezers. If you are a group R1 occupancy, where only some of your guest rooms are equipped with both refrigerators and dishwashers, your credits are prorated. So the credits available are going to be the base credits from the table times the floor area of guest rooms with kitchens divided by the total guest room floor area. So we have a little example, and here's an example of a hotel room with a dishwasher and a fridge. We have a R1 hotel in Climate Zone 5B. 10,000 square feet of the guest rooms have kitchens. The total guest room floor area is 50,000 square feet. There are 16 credits available in the base credit table. So 16 times 10,000 divided by 50,000 equals 3.2. So we're going to get 4 credits for this because we round up. So essentially just giving you credit for the floor area of the units that have the most efficient kitchen equipment. Q04, fault detection and diagnostics. Sorry. So a project that is not required to comply with section C403.2.3 can achieve these credits for installing a fault detection and diagnostic system to monitor the HVAC system's performance and automatically identify faults. The installed systems shall comply with items 1 through 6 in section C403.2.3. So section C403.2.3, there was an update to this section from the 2021 IECC. So we always had fault detection, and well, not always. Starting in 2021, We had fault detection and diagnostics listed in the code for systems serving an area 100,000 square feet or larger. Now, under the 2024 IECC, if you are a building 100,000 square feet or larger, served by one or more HVAC systems that are controlled by a DDC system, you're required to have fault detection and diagnostics. Groups R1 and R2 occupancies are accepted. So what are we requiring for these fault detection and diagnostics? You have to include permanently installed sensors and devices to monitor HVAC system performance. You have to sample HVAC system performance at least once every 15 minutes. You have to automatically identify and report those HVAC system faults, and then notify authorized personnel of identified HVAC system faults. You have to automatically provide prioritized recommendations of repair. So not only are we identifying faults, we are providing recommendations for repair based on the analysis of the data collected, and then be capable of transmitting prioritized fault repair recommendations to remotely localized authorized personnel. Could be an email, could be a text. So the only buildings that are going to be able to achieve credits under credit section Q04 are buildings smaller than 100,000 square feet. Because if you are 100,000 square feet or greater, you are going to already be required to have this. M01 refrigerator doors. This is a new one that was created just for the model low energy and carbon code. Credits are only available for group M occupancies that are utilizing refrigerated displays. All refrigerated displays must be equipped with automatically closing doors or other fixtures that allow access to the contents of the refrigerated displays while preventing the escape of refrigerated air when closed. So if you have a door, just a door that cannot stay propped open when no one is there. There is no prorating of this credit. Typically I believe there's only one credit point available. So you have to provide this for all of your refrigerated displays, or you do not achieve this credit. There's no prorating of this one. And that was it. Short and sweet compared to last week. So now if you have any questions about power and lighting or the equipment credits, or any questions if you've gone back through the slides from HVAC and service water heating or envelope that you'd like to talk through, happy to do that. You can always reach out to me as well. And that's it.
Thanks, Anna. Great overview, as always. We'll stay on the line, see if anyone has questions. Feel free to raise your hand or write in the chat. And we'll give you guys a couple of minutes. Otherwise, I'm going to start the recording.